everybody and welcome to Nami Reviews, back with another V Cinema Japanese deep dive into the Arrow Videos Essentials Collection, Bullets and Betrayal. I'm on disc 3, the conclusion of disc 3, with the surprising addition, which I didn't even know this existed until seeing this set essentially, was the female prisoner Scorpia Death Threat 1991. This is a somewhat of a continuation after basically the original series was concluded back in the 70s, which I have the original box set for, which I haven't done reviews for them, which I will consider doing maybe at some point down the line. This is when I first got into proper Japanese cinema quite some time ago, and I wasn't really doing any videos for them, but now that I'm retroactively going into deep dive into Japanese cinema and different avenues for it, I might consider kind of re-exploring the series again, maybe doing some videos for you guys soon if you're interested in that. So exactly the same as the other videos, I'll be doing a movie review for female prisoner Scorpia Death Threat and talking about the special features alongside as well. So without further ado, let's dive into the film. Female prisoner Scorpia Death Threat, released in 1991, directed by Toshihiro Ikeda, which is an infamous Japanese director which has been all over the place in terms of V Cinema, was one of the essentials and part of the Japanese company, which is something that Third Window are kind of diving into recently, releasing all their films, and had a bit of a dive into Roman porno movies, into the Toei productions. Definitely a director which has been in there and done that kind of thing and had his influence over the decades, working with some of the bigger directors at the time, being assistant director originally in his early career and making a real big name for himself within the director's company and within the V Cinema space as well. And this is a much later film compared to some of his more famous ones, which I have covered one of his films already, being Evil Dead Trap, which was part of the kind of 88 film release alongside Tokyo Decadence, which I know there's a very infamous film which I need to check out now called The Mermaid Legend, which is available on the Third Window release and available on Shutter right now in the UK. So that's definitely one that I'll be exploring soon, being the fact that film is probably his best film from what everyone's been saying, and definitely was the best film and part of the director's company's kind of lineup, being the fact they only had a certain amount of films kind of, produced and kind of put together during that time frame. And it's also another infamous film, being the fact the director for this, for female prisoner Scorpia Death Threat and Mermaid Legend and Evil Dead Trap, did commit suicide on the set, going back to Mermaid Legend, which is really horrible and really tragic, and just a real sad end to this kind of very influential kind of filmmaker, which maybe there's some kind of, heartache and truth into some of his filmmaking that can be seen throughout some of his films, which I've only seen a couple, granted, but it's a real tragedy and it's a real shame, which is another reason why this V Cinema collection, I think, is a really good kind of preserving kind of history and kind of, showcasing films that had very limited kind of access in terms of, VHS, DVD, were kind of forgotten, abandoned essentially, and maybe people outside of Japan never heard of these films, or maybe had never had access to them in terms of a good quality or maybe good English subtitles. So it's really great and really kind of telling of a time we're in now, where we're kind of going back to those older films, putting together the best possible kind of, HD transfer to the best material we can, new exclusive extras, and just kind of doing a collection of films from directors and, people that have obviously long gone now, and kind of celebrate them alongside their work. The main star for this film is Nasuda Komodo, which I hope I said her name correctly, is the main character for this film and the main star, and basically she's the new kind of, legacy kind of female Scorpio kind of character essentially. And it's interesting on the special feature side, which I'll get into in a moment. Basically in real life she was a very outspoken person, she, TV kind of persona, and someone who was very much known during that time, during the kind of the early 90s, and to cast her in this film as a potentially a new female prisoner Scorpia kind of lead star, it's very interesting for the time and very risky as well, because she was not a traditional actress. And looking at her IMDb list, she's only done about 4 or 5 films, not really kind of dived back into the space again. And now, saying that, diving into the film itself without going too much into the original franchise, I don't want to explore too much of that in this video. I'll save that for another video at the time, but keeping it short, I really like the female prisoner Scorpia films. I think they're excellent. I haven't seen the 4th one, granted. I've seen the first 3, but the first 2 are absolutely phenomenal. Third one is pretty good, but it's a really good little kind of time and a place, 70s exploitation film, break revenge movies, and just really strong female-led kind of performance and great characters, and just excellently well made, and have a lot to say about the kind of the social status at the time and women's position in kind of films and within society, and just a really good kind of interesting kind of blueprint full of imitators that will come later on within the going into the 80s, obviously landing into the 90s, which Toei had the rights to these films still, so they could still carry on and say, hey, look, if you want to do a sequel or continuation of some kind, here's the rights, here's the script, go ahead and do it, essentially. And it acts basically like a legacy sequel, like a traditional legacy movie. You've got the kind of speculations, you've got the legendary of the Scorpia kind of character, and you've got false pretenses and kind of hidden betrayals and double crosses and the usual stuff. It's all about the corruption within that prison, where you essentially got a new character this time around, which has a great opening sequence where she basically is pretending to be kind of homeless, and then she basically assassinates another Yakuza type kind of character, gangster kind of character, and she kind of quickly changes between her kind of hobo kind of look to a kind of a awesome badass kind of on a motorcycle, all leather kind of stuff. And it's pretty awesome. And you get this really kick-ass track. It's a really cool introduction to a character. We don't know much about her. Before that, though, we do get a pretty shocking sequence where basically a woman's been dumped in this kind of like, land pit. She's coming out of this kind of like cement kind of, wheelbarrow type thing. And basically she's covered from head to toe. And then we get this kind of little time jump where she's basically an assassin for hire. And we find out as the film goes along that basically she is a contract killer. An incident happened to her where she was basically kind of tortured and raped and basically left for dead. A Yakuza gangster character basically takes her in, trains her to be a killer, trains her to basically live a luxurious kind of life and basically get her revenge, while also basically taking out other kind of jobs on the side for money. And basically this has been a very lucrative relationship for basically 5 years. Her character that she was in the past is no longer who she is now, and she is someone who is up for hire. She gets offered this kind of very strange kind of deal, very similar to kind of like Escape Plan, I would say, the Schwarzenegger Stallone kind of idea where, hey, look, I'm a warden, I want to run for kind of, mayor, or kind of want to be a senator, essentially. I need a problem that needs to go away, essentially, in the old kind of prison that I used to work. And this ties into the original movies. Basically, the female prisoner Scorpia, original from the original movies, is basically being kept in a cave, kind of hidden away. And, basically the prison is going to be moved from one location to the next. I am running for basically like a political kind of, position, and I can't have the sins of the past follow me into the future. I need you to go into prison. We'll set you up. We'll put you in place, we'll give you a gun, and we'll want you to kill that person and make it look like an accident and just, ruffle the feathers a little bit and put an end to this once and for all. Of course, things are not always what they seem. There was double crosses, and we're not too sure what the truth is. Is this person in the cave the original female prisoner Scorpia? Is she in her 40s now? Is she, is this time gone past? Is the original dead? Has she escaped? We just don't know, and we find out as the course of the film goes along. It's very compelling, it's very interesting. In fact, we've got this new character, which initially is quite cold and quite kind of very blunt and doesn't really have a lot to say during the first portion, but as the film goes along, and she has to go on this kind of rampage, kind of revenge, kind of desire to basically escape the prison and to basically go against the kind of the people that contracted and hired her. I would say this is more of a grindhouse style film, less than an exploitation film. It definitely still has that kind of throwback in terms of some of the nudity and some of the explicit stuff, but nowhere near as kind of bad compared to what the original movies were. This is definitely a standalone film within itself. You don't even need to watch the original movies. It gives you a couple of clips and gives you a fresh reminders of who the original character was and what the legacy of that person was, being the fact they were the 70s, this is the 90s now. How they've used that to jump off this kind of new story for this new character and this kind of new modern setting, which I think is quite interesting. And I think it's a really good experiment. I think it's really creatively well put together. Surprisingly, it is really well paced despite being quite slow. If you're expecting to look at a fun gun action film or lots of kind of blood and guts every 5 seconds, you're not going to get it. This is definitely a build-up movie, and it definitely takes its sweet time for sure, being the fact that kind of the initial main all-out violence is in the last kind of 10-15 minutes. However, the majority based on the prison, I think, is actually quite compelling and quite well told, and it's very stylistic, and it shows the kind of inner workings between the prison wards and the guards and some of the internal relationships. And I think the kind of the spirit of the original movies has lived on throughout this kind of series, and I like the fact that she has become legend, the Scorpia legend of someone defying against government, defying against her position as a woman, and not being objectified or being molested or being used by men, essentially, and just kind of standing her ground and basically saying fuck you, essentially. I really like that, and I think that's a really apparent in this film as well, especially when you have a main actress in real life as being someone who's known to be somewhat outspoken, saying her piece and being a kind of an activist herself. I think it's very fitting of a character and very fitting of an actress in that role for that time. And being the fact that, you know, she doesn't have much acting experience from what I gathered, she definitely puts herself through the paces. You know, this is a very physical role at times, definitely kind of putting herself through kind of lots of blood and kind of cement and kind of, you know, throwing herself out a little bit there and there. And she definitely looks badass. She definitely has some good captivating scenes. Overall, I think Female Prisoner Scorpio Death Threat is a really solid kind of continuation, acts as more like a legacy sequel to the original 4 movies. It definitely plays around with continuity a little bit, but it stands alone by itself. It definitely captivates what the original movies were in terms of the spirit, in terms of the energy, and definitely has more of a kind of a 90s kind of attitude towards it. Definitely continuing a lot of the themes in terms of how basically men and government and kind of these systems are in place to kind of, you know, bring people down, and we have to kind of rise to the challenge and we have to stand our ground, and how people are manipulated and used and how they want to be free and be kind of, you know, expressionistic and basically just kind of voice their concerns and voice their position in the world essentially. And I really like that kind of attitude, and I think the film itself is very much a riff on the 70s exploitation, but definitely more grindhouse style, I would say. I think the directing and the creative style for this film is definitely very much on brand for the director. I really like the set locations within the prison, within the opening, within the ending. I really like how it goes to somewhat supernatural-ish kind of elements to it kind of thing. It's kind of borderline supernatural in terms of the legend of the Scorpio character, which I think is quite interesting. It definitely is highlighting his strengths, definitely kind of utilizing the violence, the kind of the more grindhouse style, the more supernatural horror-ish kind of aspects to it, which I think is quite cool, and will also be a very compelling kind of story while it is a bit slow in places, while it doesn't kind of reach the full peak of what it could have done. I think it definitely could have been a little bit better towards that kind of third act. I think it could have done a little bit more with that and a little bit more badassery, but I like the fact of what it ultimately says, what it does, and I think it's a very enjoyable film for sure, and I definitely would watch it as part of the 5th entry of the Female Prisoner Scorpio movies, definitely down the line for sure. Maybe watch them all as in 1 to 5. I think it'd be pretty fun. I'm not too sure about the other spin-off movies or if they're any good or worth tracking down, but in terms of this director, in terms of this film, for this V-Cinema collection, I think this is definitely a win for sure, and I really enjoyed my time with it. As always with this V-Cinema collection, go in with the right expectations. Don't expect a massive, huge budget. Just see what the film is trying to offer you, see if it works for you, and then maybe you'll get a really kick-ass film out of it by the end. We have a brand new extra called Monster of Vengeance by Sam Dakin, a Japanese historian, which is a brand new 50-minute extra on the edition, which is a really good little extra talking about the director and his past and how it led to him working at the director's company and his kind of past relations with Toei and obviously joining the V-Cinema kind of crowd, and how the original movies lead into this film. And I think it's a nice little kind of informational package that gives you a bit of insight into what was going on during that time, and exploring a little bit about the original Female Prisoner Scorpio films leading into the spin-offs, and obviously leading into this one with Death Threat. It's a nice little package kind of piece, which gives you a bit of more of an insight into how this film was put together, essentially, into how this series has gone from the early 70s and still being imitated and reimagined and reboot into the late 2000s, and still being new iterations coming from this kind of idea of a strong female-led kind of role. I think the message and the point of what that video essay was trying to do and trying to explore in terms of how this movie fits into the bigger scope of, you know, those kind of films during that time, and how it still is being kind of looked and viewed from a modern lens kind of perspective, I think is quite interesting, and how we're kind of re-exploring that again within the kind of brand new releases from Arrow and from Furwinder, and going into the director's company, going into V-Cinema. And I think it's definitely a good historical kind of preserving these films for an explorative piece for a time and a place within Japanese history. Exactly the same as the others, we get the original trailer included and a introduction piece, which is about 15 minutes. Once again, be cautious. It does reveal the ending of the film and major spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film and you want to go in blind as much as possible, watch the film first, watch the introduction after, because it's a good little extra, which I do appreciate. I think it's a really interesting kind of add-on to kind of like before watching the film, but my God, the footage keeps on ruining these films. Good little extra introduction. Just watch it after the film, don't watch it before. So what are your thoughts and opinions on Female Prisoner Scorpio Death Threat? What do you think of this sequel, or maybe the other spin-offs? What are your thoughts on the original movies? Love to know your thoughts and opinions. So in the meantime, guys, I'm Amphlett Reviews, signing out.